13,000 pages filled with questions, sketches, and impossible ideas. No degrees, no mentors, just a mind that never stopped. Leonardo da Vinci painted the most famous face in history and designed flying machines centuries before flight. He dissected the human body, engineered robots, and mapped the world before maps made sense. Artist, scientist, inventor, rule breaker. This is the story of Leonardo da Vinci, the man who lived 500 years ahead of his time. Leonardo di Ser Piero da Vinci entered the world on April 15, 1452, in the small Tuscan town of Vinci. His birth circumstances were unusual. He was illegitimate, born to a notary named Ser Piero and a peasant woman named Caterina. This outsider status would shape his entire approach to learning and discovery. While legitimate children of his social class received formal education in Latin and classical texts, Leonardo was largely self-taught. The boy spent his earliest years in the countryside hamlet of Anciano, where he lived with his mother before being taken into his father's household at age 3. Here, under the care of his uncle Francesco, Leonardo developed his most crucial skill, the art of observation. While other children learned Latin and mathematics in formal schools, Leonardo studied the natural world directly. He watched water flow over rocks, examined the flight patterns of birds, and dissected whatever creatures he could find. This unconventional education shaped Leonardo's entire approach to knowledge. Instead of accepting what ancient texts proclaimed, he insisted on seeing for himself. This method would later bridge the gap between medieval superstition and modern scientific thinking. When he wrote in his notebooks, "Obstacles do not break me. Every obstacle yields to stern resolve," he was describing not just his personality, but his revolutionary approach to learning. In 1466, when Leonardo was 14, his father made a decision that would change art history forever. He apprenticed his son to Andrea del Verrocchio, one of Florence's most prestigious artists. Verrocchio's workshop was more than an art studio. It was a combination laboratory, engineering firm, and think tank where young men learned sculpture, painting, mathematics, and mechanical engineering. The workshop system of Renaissance Italy was perfectly suited to Leonardo's curious mind. Apprentices did not simply copy their masters. They collaborated on projects, shared techniques, and pushed each other toward innovation. Verrocchio himself had studied goldsmithing and engineering, which meant his students learned to think like both artists and inventors. Leonardo's talent emerged immediately and dramatically. When Verrocchio was painting the Baptism of Christ around 1470, he allowed his young apprentice to paint one of the angels. The story goes that Verrocchio was so impressed and perhaps humbled by Leonardo's angel that he vowed never to paint again. Whether this tale is completely accurate matters less than what it reveals about Leonardo's extraordinary ability to absorb and then transcend his teacher's methods. But Leonardo did more than excel at traditional techniques. He began to question everything. Why did certain pigments fade while others remained vibrant? How could perspective be used to create more convincing illusions of depth? What mathematical principles govern proportion and beauty? These questions would drive his innovations for the rest of his life. In 1482, Leonardo made a bold career move. At age 30, he wrote a letter to Ludovico Sforza, the Duke of Milan, essentially applying for a job. But this was no ordinary job application. Leonardo described himself not primarily as an artist, but as a military engineer who could design bridges, cannons, armored vehicles, and siege machines. Art, he mentioned almost as an afterthought. This letter reveals Leonardo's understanding that Renaissance Italy was a world of constant warfare and political upheaval. Cities needed engineers who could both defend them and help them conquer their enemies. Leonardo positioned himself as exactly that kind of practical genius. The Duke hired him, and Leonardo spent the next 17 years in Milan, the most productive period of his life. Milan transformed Leonardo from a talented artist into a true polymath. The Duke kept him busy with an astonishing variety of projects, painting portraits, designing elaborate court festivals, planning military fortifications, and studying everything from anatomy to hydraulics. This diversity of challenges perfectly matched Leonardo's restless curiosity. It was in Milan that Leonardo created The Last Supper, painted between 1495 and 1497. This masterpiece demonstrates his revolutionary approach to composition and his deep understanding of human psychology. Instead of depicting the apostles as static figures, Leonardo captured them in the moment of shock and confusion after Jesus announces his betrayal. Each figure reacts according to his personality, creating a complex study of human emotion. The technical innovation behind The Last Supper was equally groundbreaking. Leonardo painted it using an experimental technique that allowed him to work slowly and make revisions, something impossible with traditional fresco painting. Although this technique caused the painting to deteriorate within his lifetime, it allowed Leonardo to achieve unprecedented psychological depth. Leonardo's fascination with the human body began with his art, but evolved into something far more profound. To paint convincing human figures, Renaissance artists needed to understand anatomy. Most were content with superficial knowledge of muscles and proportions. Leonardo wanted to understand everything about how the human body worked. He obtained permission to dissect human corpses at hospitals throughout Italy. This was dangerous work, both physically and politically. The church officially permitted dissection for medical education, but Leonardo went far beyond what was typically allowed. He may have dissected up to 30 human bodies during his lifetime. Leonardo's anatomical drawings reveal a mind that could see the body as both a work of art and a complex machine. His sketches of the human skull, made in 1489, were so accurate that medical students still study them today. He was the first person to draw the human appendix, lungs, and urinary tract. His studies of the heart were so advanced that in 2005, a heart surgeon used Leonardo's 500-year-old observations to develop new surgical techniques. But Leonardo's anatomical studies went beyond simple observation. He filled the lungs of corpses with wax to study their internal structure. He injected the brain's ventricles with wax to understand their shape. He replaced muscles with strings to study how they created movement. These techniques were centuries ahead of their time and reveal Leonardo's understanding that the human body was an engineering marvel worth studying with engineering methods. Of all Leonardo's obsessions, none captured his imagination more completely than human flight. He filled thousands of pages with studies of birds, bats, and insects, trying to decode the secrets of their aerial mastery. This was not merely artistic curiosity. Leonardo believed that humans could and should fly. Leonardo's flying machine designs reveal both his genius and the limitations of his era. The ornithopter, his most famous flying machine design, featured a wingspan of over 33 feet and was designed to be powered by human muscle through a complex system of pulleys and cranks. The pilot would lie prone in the center, pedaling with his feet and cranking with his hands to make the wings flap. Modern engineers understand that Leonardo's ornithopter could never have achieved powered flight. Human muscles simply cannot generate enough power relative to body weight to sustain flight. But Leonardo's designs were not failures. They were systematic attempts to understand the principles of aerodynamics through biomimicry. His studies of wing shapes, air currents, and bird flight revealed insights that would not be formally understood until the development of modern aerodynamics. Leonardo's aerial screw, a helicopter-like device designed around 1489, demonstrates his ability to think beyond mere imitation of nature. While the ornithopter copied bird flight, the aerial screw was based on his understanding of how screws move through solid materials. If a screw could pull itself through wood, Leonardo reasoned, a large screw could pull itself through air. This leap of mechanical intuition would not be validated until the 1940s, when the first successful helicopters took flight. Leonardo's engineering projects reveal a mind that could visualize solutions to problems that would not be attempted for centuries. His designs for canal systems combined practical hydraulic engineering with visionary urban planning. He understood that cities needed not just water for drinking, but water for transportation, waste removal, and industrial power. His studies of water flow were particularly advanced. He recognized that water follows mathematical principles, and that these principles could be harnessed for human benefit. His designs for locks, dams, and diversion channels demonstrate sophisticated understanding of hydraulic engineering. When he proposed diverting the Arno River around enemy cities, he was thinking like a modern military engineer. Leonardo's mechanical inventions reveal his understanding that machines could multiply human capability. His designs for gear systems, ball bearings, and continuous variable transmissions were centuries ahead of their practical application. The ball bearing, which he sketched around 1500, was not commercially produced until the 1800s. His design for a continuously variable transmission would not be patented until 1886. But Leonardo's most prescient engineering insight was his understanding of automation. His mechanical knight, designed around 1495, was a humanoid robot capable of sitting, standing, and moving its arms. This was not a toy or a curiosity. It was Leonardo's attempt to create a machine that could perform human tasks without human intervention. This vision of mechanical labor would not be realized until the Industrial Revolution, but Leonardo saw its potential 300 years early. One of Leonardo's most intriguing habits was his mirror writing. Nearly all of his notes were written backwards, from right to left, creating text that could only be read easily when held up to a mirror. This unusual practice has generated numerous theories about Leonardo's motivations. The most practical explanation is that Leonardo was left-handed, and mirror writing prevented him from smudging wet ink. But this simple explanation may miss deeper psychological and intellectual purposes. Some scholars suggest that Leonardo used mirror writing as a form of intellectual exercise, forcing himself to think more carefully about his ideas by literally reversing his normal writing process. The mirror writing also served a protective function. In an age when new ideas could be considered heretical, backwards writing made Leonardo's notes more difficult for casual readers to understand. His anatomical studies, his geological observations about the age of the Earth, and his speculations about human flight all challenged accepted religious and philosophical doctrines. Leonardo's notebooks reveal a mind that never stopped questioning. He wrote and drew on subjects ranging from geology to optics, often jumping from topic to topic on a single page. This intellectual restlessness was both a strength and a weakness. It allowed him to make connections between seemingly unrelated fields, but it also meant that many of his projects remained forever unfinished. Leonardo's genius came with a psychological cost. He was a notorious procrastinator who left many commissioned works unfinished. The Mona Lisa took him nearly 20 years to complete, and he was still working on it when he died. The Adoration of the Magi, one of his early commissions, was never finished at all. This pattern of incompletion was not laziness or lack of skill. It was the natural result of a mind that could always see ways to improve and refine his work. Leonardo's notebooks reveal a man constantly seeking perfection, constantly discovering new techniques and ideas that made his current work seem inadequate. He once wrote, "Art is never finished, only abandoned." The burden of genius also isolated Leonardo socially. He was described as gracious but reserved, elegant but unconventional. He dressed in colorful clothing that dismissed current fashions and kept himself physically fit well into old age. He was likely a vegetarian, extremely unusual for his time, and was known to purchase caged birds just to set them free. Leonardo's sexual orientation remains a subject of historical speculation. At age 24, he was arrested on charges of sodomy, but was released when no concrete evidence could be produced. This experience may have made him more guarded and secretive. Throughout his life, he formed close relationships with his male students and assistants, particularly Gian Giacomo Caprotti, nicknamed Salai, who remained with Leonardo for over 25 years. In 1499, Leonardo's comfortable life in Milan came to an abrupt end. French forces invaded the city, and his patron, Duke Ludovico Sforza, was captured and imprisoned. At age 47, Leonardo found himself without a home, without a patron, and carrying with him decades of unfinished projects and unpublished discoveries. The next 18 years of Leonardo's life were marked by restless wandering. He worked in Venice, returned to Florence, spent time in Rome, and finally accepted an invitation from King Francis I of France. In 1516, at age 64, Leonardo made his final journey, crossing the Alps to live at the Château du Clos-Lucé near Amboise. Francis I was exactly the kind of patron Leonardo needed in his final years. The young king was fascinated by Leonardo's ideas and gave him complete freedom to pursue his studies without the pressure of completing specific commissions. Leonardo spent his last 3 years organizing his notebooks and sketches, trying to prepare his vast collection of ideas for posterity. But time was running out. Leonardo's health was declining, and his right hand had become paralyzed, possibly from a stroke. On May 2nd, 1519, at the age of 67, Leonardo da Vinci died at Clos-Lucé. According to legend, King Francis I was holding his head as he passed away. Leonardo's death marked the end of an extraordinary life, but the beginning of an even more extraordinary afterlife. For centuries, his notebooks remained scattered and largely unread. It was not until the 19th and 20th centuries that scholars began to fully appreciate the scope of his scientific and technological insights. Modern analysis of Leonardo's work reveals a mind that anticipated many of the fundamental principles of modern science. He understood that the sun, not the Earth, was the center of our solar system, 40 years before Copernicus published his heliocentric theory. He grasped the basic principles of gravity 200 years before Newton. He speculated about evolution and the age of the Earth 400 years before Darwin. Leonardo's approach to knowledge was fundamentally modern. He insisted on direct observation rather than relying on ancient authorities. He used mathematical analysis to understand natural phenomena. He conducted controlled experiments and recorded his results systematically. These methods would not become standard in European science until the 17th century. Today, 5 centuries after his death, Leonardo's ideas continue to influence modern technology. Engineers study his gear designs, his understanding of fluid dynamics, and his insights into mechanical engineering. His approach to biomimicry, learning from nature to solve human problems, has become a major field of modern research. Leonardo's vision of human flight finally became reality in the 20th century. Modern helicopters operate on principles he sketched in the 15th century. His parachute design was successfully tested in 2000, when a skydiver used a parachute built from Leonardo's specifications. But Leonardo's most important legacy may be his demonstration that human curiosity has no limits. In an age of increasing specialization, Leonardo reminds us that the greatest insights often come from connecting different fields of knowledge. His combination of artistic sensitivity, scientific rigor, and engineering practicality created a unique form of genius that remains relevant today. What would Leonardo think of our modern world? He would probably be fascinated by the realization of so many of his dreams. Humans do fly in machines that work on principles he sketched. We have mechanical devices that can perform complex tasks without human intervention. We can see inside the human body without cutting it open. But Leonardo would also recognize that the fundamental challenges he identified remain unsolved. How can we harness technology to improve human life without destroying the natural world he loved so deeply? How can we balance the power of mechanical innovation with the wisdom of humanistic values? Leonardo's life suggests that the future belongs to those who can combine technical skill with artistic vision, scientific rigor with humanistic values. He showed us that the most important discoveries come not from narrow specialization, but from the courage to ask fundamental questions about how the world works. In our age of artificial intelligence and genetic engineering, of climate change and space exploration, Leonardo's example remains remarkably relevant. He teaches us that true genius lies not in having all the answers, but in never stopping to ask the right questions. The man who was 500 years ahead of his time continues to point us toward a future where human curiosity and creativity can solve the greatest challenges we face. Leonardo da Vinci died believing he had accomplished nothing. His final words reportedly were, "I've offended God and mankind because my work did not reach the quality it should have." He could not have been more wrong. The illegitimate child from a small Italian town had become something far more important than a successful artist or inventor. He had become a permanent symbol of human potential, a reminder that the only limits to human achievement are the limits we accept in our own minds.